An investigation into Chinese fishing fleets and processing centers has discovered that seafood produced with forced labor is making its way to American dinner tables. That's despite a U.S. ban on imports made by workers from China's Xinjiang province. The region in northwest China is home to Muslim minority Uyghurs who've been the victims of well-documented human rights violations. John Yang has more.
If you buy frozen seafood at the grocery store or order fish at a chain restaurant, chances are pretty good that it was caught by a Chinese fishing vessel or processed in a Chinese plant. China runs what may be the largest maritime operation ever known. An investigation by the not-for-profit journalism organization called the Outlaw Ocean Project has documented human rights, labor, and environmental concerns related to the Chinese fleet. As Outlaw Ocean founder Ian Urbina tells us in this excerpt from the group's reporting, Chinese fishing ships rely on forced labor.
Foreign journalists are generally forbidden from reporting in Xinjiang. So the team of investigators had to rely on a range of publicly available materials, including company newsletters, local news reports, trade data, satellite imagery, and social media.
But the real kind of key of our investigation became the use of the Chinese version of TikTok, which is called Douyin.
Videos posted by Uyghurs from seafood plants show that many live in military-style dormitories under the watch of security personnel. Uyghur workers' dorms are often searched, and if a Quran or other contraband is found, the owner may be sent to a re-education camp. Uyghurs' social media posts are also closely monitored by Chinese online censors. Posting anything critical of the regime could quickly land them in a detention center. But it appears that many Uyghurs have found a way to include cryptic messages in their videos to convey their suffering, while also bypassing the Chinese censors. Thousands of tons of seafood processed in China with forced labor continue to enter the United States and Europe. Importers sent their products to major supermarkets around the world, including Walmart, Kroger, Tesco, and Carrefour. The importers also sent seafood to Cisco, the global food service giant that supplies more than 400,000 restaurants in the US alone. Over the past 5 years, the US government spent more than $200 million to buy seafood from importers linked to Uyghur labor, for use in military bases, federal prisons, and public schools.
This investigation represents 4 years of work by Ian Urbina, the executive editor of the Outlaw Ocean Project. And how did you find that this labor, putting the Uyghurs to work in these processing plants, sort of fit in the Chinese overall strategy in dealing with the Uyghurs? The Uyghurs are a Muslim minority in China.
Yeah, I mean, there's this general policy from the Chinese government to try to relocate many of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang and disperse them elsewhere in the country to sort of pacify the population, if you will. So there's a huge state-run labor transfer program with thousands of Uyghurs that are forcibly removed from this inland province, Xinjiang, and transported 2,000 miles away to the other side of the country to work in the factories. And it's all part of an effort to sort of bring this restive province under control.
Ian, you talked to about more than 24 of the crew members, people who worked on these ships. What did they tell you about the conditions they worked under and the conditions of their employment?
Yeah, I mean, we found a lot of forced labor and trafficked labor. Before COVID, a lot of these workers are Indonesian. After COVID, largely rural Chinese. They're pretty nervous to talk openly when we were on board, but you could see the conditions. There are a lot of reports of violence on board and neglect, severe neglect.
And these ships often don't return to port for 2 years, stay at sea for 2 years. How did you manage to talk to these people?
Yeah, it was a process. Typically it takes several days just to get out to the fishing grounds or on the high seas. Once we're out there, we make radio contact with the captain. We try to warm the captain up and see if he'll let us on board. If not, oftentimes the ships would flee and we'd get in board a faster boat called a skiff and follow the fishing ships. And in those cases, we'd put messages in a bottle, asking questions of the crew in Bahasa, Indonesian, or Chinese and English, and throw the bottles onto the back of the ship, and then follow them until the crew threw the bottles back with answers.
And not only answers, but some of them asking for help, some of them giving you phone numbers.
Yeah, the most useful thing were the phone numbers, because then we could contact families back home in Indonesia or China and ask those families how long they'd been gone and sort of what they knew of their lost family.
You also found violations of law in the way they fished, and also environmental violations.
Yeah, many cases of, shark finning, of invasions of sovereignty. So this is a huge fleet, and often these vessels are aggressively going into waters where they're forbidden, Argentinian, Chilean, Ecuadorian waters where they're not allowed. So we documented those cases just to show how pervasive the problem is.
And how are they able to escape enforcement and escape inspection and that sort of thing?
These vessels largely are on the high seas, and this is an area that's very hard to get to. The vessels are in constant motion, and most countries around the world don't have navies out there patrolling their own waters, much less the high seas. So these are working places that are largely out of reach of governments, and that's why they can do as they please.
And there were also signs that these ships were doing more than fishing, or fishing for other things in a way.
Yeah, I mean, China's fishing fleet is in many ways sort of a arm of its geopolitical agenda. It's sort of a projection of power. And so if you look at places like the South China Sea, contested waters in that area, the fishing fleet is essentially acting as a civilian militia. And you have enough fishing vessels there that they can crowd around other countries' vessels and crowd around islands that are in contested waters and sort of establish sovereignty and show muscle.
It's an ambitious project, and you found some very interesting things. Now, where can people read and see your reporting?
With the New Yorker on their website.
Very good. Ian Urbina, the founder and executive editor of the Outlaw Ocean Project. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.